Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Coaching the Bible. This is episode 190, season 4, episode 30. The portion of the week is the portion known as Kedoshim, smack in the middle of the book of Leviticus. I hope you are doing well today. Our topic of the week is truth. We're going to talk about the truth. We talked earlier this year about moral truth. Today we're just going to talk about the truth. But first, our win of the week and our learning of the week. The win of the week, twofold. One, we went to a beautiful, beautiful wedding the other night. And to be in that space and having the opportunity to celebrate something at a very difficult and heavy time was more meaningful than I initially thought it would be. And the ceremony itself was incredibly emotional and happy and joyous, but also very deep and very powerful at the same time. The setting was perfect. The weather was perfect. Everything about it was just incredible, and it really just hit a note for me that I did not realize how desperately I needed at the moment. So I'm deeply appreciative of that win. The second win of the week is I had a former client, reach out to me to have a brainstorming / strategy session. And it's a win because it just means that in the time that we spent together, when we worked together, their value was there. They got something out of it. They appreciated what it was that I had to offer them as a coach. And when they come back, that's very gratifying. And I'd love everyone to come back and be a paying customer for all time. But just that I'm a source for them, or I'm a resource for them for those kinds of conversations is very meaningful for me. The learning of the week is actually related to the podcast. The podcast of late has been a struggle for me, coming up with new concepts and new ideas, new sources and resources. The biblical Torah portion of it is infinite, that's to be honest. But the coaching concepts, I'm concerned that I was running out of them. And so the learning for me is that in those spaces, I have to just dig deeper and go into the struggle a little bit more, do the work a little bit harder, spend more time on it than maybe I had been doing when it was quote unquote easier than it is at the moment, and do that and believe in the process that something will come out of it that'll be worthwhile, and that the struggle is the win, the journey is the victory. And on the other end of that, the output will be something worthwhile for the people that are listening. Our subject of the week is truth. And the reason why the subject of the week is truth is because there is an incredible lack of truth in the world right now. And we're experiencing it in real time, but in a ton of ways. A famous quote about the truth is that a lie will get across the world before the truth has her boots on. Very much felt true this week. In the space of what we're dealing with here on the home front, a ceasefire not negotiated that was approved or agreed upon by our enemy. The world believing it, buying it, owning it, selling it, trusting it, even though none of it was accurate or true. And then us sort of looking like we had egg on our face when in fact we don't. And so the truth seems to be losing. I think Rabbi Sachs has a quote about the truth. It's a truth lost a long time ago. We see it. We see it play out in real time. We see it playing out on campuses. They're very public. We see it playing out in media. We see it playing out at the negotiating table. And perhaps at the most dangerous levels, at the leadership level, at government levels, where the truth simply just disappears, or versions of the truth become a possibility, or the facts as they were, or as they happened, or as they played out seem to shift. And then there's suddenly the ability to have multiple truths to an event, or forget the truth of what happened and supplant the truth with another version of the truth. I mean, it's incredibly dangerous. And I wouldn't say it's sort of mind-numbing or shocking, because it's neither of the two anymore, because it's neither shocking nor mind-numbing, because you see it all the time and we've seen it all the time. And this is simply just a culmination of years and years and years of this kind of acceptance and behavior of non-truth as factual. And there was a great quote that I saw on this from someone by the name of Teal Swan. I have no idea who that is or if that's actually a person. It's a heck of a name for a fiction novel, Teal Swan. But here's the quote. When a truth destabilizes and destroys something, the structure it destroys was not real in the first place. It was an illusion. If the foundations of the so-called truth are so weak as to be destabilized by something that's actually true, that's factually true, that's demonstrably true, then that thing itself wasn't true to begin with. Or what we thought was the truth, or what we thought was there, isn't actually there. And so what you see now in a lot of places is that fundamental principles as they relate to democracy, democratic principles, aren't as strong as people think they are. The foundations of truth as they may exist on certain campuses, I'm sure we've all thought it, believed it, heard about it, read about it, but it's demonstrably the case that truth is no longer a factor there. Or who people rely on or trust, fundamentals to truth, right, or trust and reliability, are in fact people who are not either trustworthy or reliable in the facts that they're spewing. And so we find ourselves in an incredibly precarious and dangerous situation again. And what then does it require of someone, this is me sort of on a soapbox for a few minutes here at the outset, is for people to stand up and not just speak their truths. Boy, don't get me started on that one. But speak the truth. Talk about what is actually true, what is not true, what is factual, what is evidential, what is demonstrable. What can we see to be, in fact, the truth? And when that's the case, then everything else sort of fades away, right? Because in that statement from that I just mentioned, the other thing that we thought was true, in fact, is not actually true. It simply goes by way of the wind. And if that's the case, it just has no legs to stand on. There's this very famous idea, I don't know the source of it, in Judaism, about the difference between the words truth and falsehood in Hebrew. When they're spelled out, they're written out, that the letters that correspond to the word truth in Hebrew is emet. They have legs. Each of the letters, as they're written, have legs. It's very strong, it has foundation. The word for lies or falsehood is sheker, and each of those letters has no basis, has one leg. It simply doesn't stand, it doesn't survive, it doesn't have support. There's a famous Mark Twain quote that basically said this: if you tell the truth, you don't have to remember anything. The reason why that is because you have nothing to worry about. Whatever you're going to say is going to be true. There's no falsehood, there's no fake, there's nothing that's going to come out of your mouth that isn't the truth. You're trustworthy and you're reliable. And in the space of you being a leader in your home, in your community, in your place of work, if you stand on a side that is unpopular at the moment, but that in fact is the side of truth, it's an incredibly difficult place to be. To stand up for truth in a space, in a domain where it's dangerous for you, it has implications for you with respect to colleagues, teammates, superiors, bosses, other community leaders, that's incredibly dangerous. I may have mentioned this once before in the podcast. Years ago, I taught for a long time a course on the Middle East conflict, on the Arab-Israel conflict, and I taught students how to respond and how to talk about the different issues, a methodology about how to talk about these. I mentioned it more than once actually. But I never gave the go-ahead to my students to stand up in a classroom and take on another student or a professor on a college campus. And yet, I had multiple students, in fact, do that to their detriment to some degree, but more power to them for having done it. This is already more than 10 years ago, where a student of mine stood up in a classroom on campus, college campus, where the professor was spreading lies about the Jewish people, about the state of Israel, about the conflict, and this student took this teacher on. When it's going to impact a person's grade in that sense, at the time, certainly, I was not a fan of that. I didn't advocate for it. But she did it. It hurt her, and at least in the standing of the classroom with respect to the teacher. But she gained some by the views and the perception of other students towards her. And so truth is incredibly powerful when it's implemented and when it's used properly and appropriately and effectively, and when someone is actually willing to listen to the truth. Otherwise, it's lies. If you're on X/Twitter/ whatever you want to call it, there's a lot of lies on that platform. If you use ChatGPT on occasion, you'll find that it's not always truthful. Yesterday I was looking for a quote on something specific. It gave me the quote, but it attributed it to the wrong person. Now I knew that it was the wrong person because I know the name of the person who actually said it, and I asked then for ChatGPT to be accurate in its sharing of information. So the truth is important. The truth is fundamental. The truth is clear that we need it for society to function. And when it doesn't exist and when it doesn't function, when it's not there, either at the highest levels of government and leadership, when it's the most dangerous, it trickles down to the lowest levels. If you're going to be the President of the United States, leader of the free world, the leader of another country, and simply just live in lies, if you're going to be a person with a massive platform, and you're going to tell things and believe things and say things that aren't true, then you really have no right nor any expectation that people below you are going to tell the truth either. You've created a culture of lies. You've created a culture where the truth isn't sacrosanct, isn't important, isn't crucial, and therefore you have nothing. I don't want this just to be a soapbox. I do want this to actually be Bible also connected. But we know truthfully, in this week's portion, that at the core of the concept of holiness and sanctity, which is at the root of what this week's portion is about, are concepts related to and surrounding the concept of truth. There's the legal framework that when you judge someone in a court, you have to judge them appropriately, with righteousness and justice. The system has to be just. The system has to be true. Understandable. When we talk about the system as it relates to a larger system, the system of the universe, so then, of course, there has to be truth in that as well. But truth in heaven, as Rabbi Sachs writes, is harmonious and radiant and eternal. But the truth for man, that's not up there. We can't be in the same sense and the same idea of truth as is God. We can only hope to imitate, we can only hope to bring versions of truth down to earth. But at the core of the concept of sanctity is the concept of truth. Take a look, Leviticus 19. It has to be one of the top chapters in the Old Testament, one that you could spend weeks and months and years studying, and see where truth plays in there. But at the same time that the Bible tells you that you have to operate from a space and from a standpoint of truth in a place of law, and when you're speaking to others, you have to be truthful, at the same time there are concepts that we know of, like the benefit of the doubt. The benefit of the doubt has an element of falsehood in it, mostly because we don't actually know all the facts. We don't actually know the whole truth. And so we're able to, or we're allowed to apply some sort of fallacy to the situation because we don't actually know the truth. Or take it one step further. We mentioned it before, but Aaron, the high priest, the brother of Moses, is known as the person who was a pursuer of peace, a lover of peace. And when the Midrashic literature describes how it was that Aaron went about trying to get peace between neighbors, former friends, spouses, he would sort of lie to each of them. He would tell each that the other actually was interested and desirous of fixing the relationship, of regaining harmony, of reestablishing the connection. But that maybe wasn't exactly true. And so there is space, it would seem, for moments when coming up short of the truth is appropriate and okay. But societally speaking, civically speaking, communally speaking, in a home, it just doesn't work. In that same course, when I taught about the Middle East conflict, I had this concept, wasn't mine, it was taught to me, called partial truth, or half-truth. And the idea was that partial truth isn't the truth. Elements of it are true, but it doesn't actually tell you the truth. And we had this whole exercise about pieces of an elephant. It's a long story. But there is crucial value in being a truthful, honest person. There is a way in which a person can be truthful around others. And there was a way not to do that. And as a leader, it's super important. We could go into the philosophy of truth, talk about Maimonides, talk about Kant, talk about Aristotle, and the different conceptions and understandings of how truth works. Correspondence theory around truth, a pragmatic theory around truth. All of those are crucial. It is vital and fundamental that when you're in the space that you're in, that you can appreciate the type of truth that's necessary for success in your circumstance. Not fake truth, but there are different ways to conceive and conceptualize truth. So here, just to give you one example, is, sorry, I'm just switching my notes for this. So we have, here's an idea called pragmatic truth. Pragmatic truth is this. Pragmatic truth assesses the truth of a statement by its practical consequences and how effectively a strategy meets its intended goals. It's really simple. It's pragmatic. Like, I get it. You get the idea. Versus something that would be called like a correspondence theory of truth, which is basically the bedrock of reliable information. This is, I think, Aristotelian in terms of its nature, right? Correspondence truth involves ensuring that your business communications, let's take it in a business standpoint, and reports accurately reflect real-world facts. Right, so where pragmatic is more on, is it practically true, is it pragmatically true in that way? It's foundational for your financial reporting that there be a direct correlation and relationship between the truth that you're saying and what's actually in the documents themselves, right? You get that idea. Okay, good. So there's a lot there. And obviously, we can appreciate where and why truth is important in your leadership setting. Again, whether that's communally, whether that's citywide, whether that's in your home, whether that's in your workplace. Embracing truth and embracing the fundamental ethical value of truth, or as it is biblically speaking, Leviticus 19, the sanctified value of truth fosters a culture of trust, a foundation of trust between teammates, or more globally speaking, stakeholders. That could be your investors, that could be your customers, that could be your employers, that could be your organization. If you're in an organization, your beneficiaries. It could be your vendors. If your vendors don't view you as a truthful person, how are you going to succeed? Think about the businesses that you shop at, the places you go. Think about the people you hire. You could find a person who's exceptionally talented, but if you believe that everything that comes out of their mouth, or you can prove demonstrably, that's my word of the day, that that person is a liar, you're not hiring them. They're not going to be on your sales team if you feel like that person's an abject liar. They could be talented, they could be charismatic, they could be really good at their job. But if they're going to make up stats and figures and statistics and sell things that you don't actually make, like how is that actually valuable? So truth is important. Obviously, truth safeguards you from legal risk. By being truthful in your reporting and in your compliance and all of your operational safeguards, then you don't find yourselves in dangers and situations where the law is coming after you because you followed the law. And obviously on the flip, if you're neglecting the truth, you're going to destroy your reputation. You're going to have no trust from your stakeholders with respect to the product you sell, the documents that you produce, the financials that you share. Like, who's going to believe you? Take every business scandal around. What's at the core of it is a lack of truth or a lack of trust. The idea that I can get away with it as long as no one else finds out about it, all things are fine. And so it's important then as a leader to get at truth, to make and bake in truth into who you are in your company, in your organization, and to practice it so that it becomes fundamental to your culture. How do you do that? I think there are a couple of ways to do that. I'm going to share with you just two. I think one, I think it's super interesting, which isn't always the truth, and admittedly sometimes it's hard. I think if you're a business owner or you're in certain situations communally, I think there's something that would be called a transparency portal. I think could be unbelievable. Open book management, the sense that certain metrics of your leadership, certain ideas are accessible to everyone. And so it's available in real time. And by virtue of having that, you're sort of demystifying any sort of operational or financial aspects of your company, and you're allowing your employees to see it. You have nothing to hide. I think that's very powerful, and it's an empowering as well. I think along the same lines would be sort of a good role play, which is to put people in the hot seat. I think this is always great. I do this a lot in fundraising where I flip people's roles and put people in the hot seat, and you sort of gamify this circumstance situation where they play the leader's role or they play the other person's role in a certain circumstance that you develop, a situational matter that you develop where there are different options, different choices, different ways to go about it. And you see how people operate in those spaces, in those moments. And by virtue of doing that, you're teaching them incredibly powerful and beautiful lessons. And at the same time, everybody is learning. The culture is changing. The culture is improving. And by virtue of that, you get to a better place. You find people ultimately operate better, handle themselves better, lean into and more naturally approach truth from a better standpoint and a greater sense of comfort each and every time. And to end with a quote, as we always do, from a surprising source. This week's quote is from Buddha. 3 things cannot be long hidden: the sun, the moon, and the truth. That is Coaching the Bible for this week. I look forward to seeing you next week.